Hello, hello, hello. Am I audible, boys? Perfect.
Hello, hi, this is Ramesh here.
A very good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, we're so sorry about the delay. We're just waiting for a couple of participants to join in again. We'll be simultaneously sharing this session on our YouTube live as well. So I request you to wait for 5 more minutes and then we'll start if it's okay.
Sure. I have a hard stop though at 7 o'clock, right? So we
All
can
right,
get
then
started.
we'll
I don't
turn
have a
that
problem.
5 into 2 minutes. And yeah,
That's fine.
let's try to.
No
Thank you so
problem.
much. Um, Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session. We'll be starting this session now. Before this, let me just start the recording so it can be made available for people later.
Recording in progress.
Yes, that works. Right. So let me invite our speaker for today, Mr. Ramesh Hariyanan. He is the CTO of LatentView Analytics. So in this session, we will be sharing his experiences around the wonders of analytics and what the future for this industry holds. So with his decades of experience, Mr. Ramesh, along with his team, has been building on data-intensive AI-driven applications for the future Fortune 500 clients from across the globe. Apart from being a technical expert, Mr. Ramesh has also been in the leadership capacity for quite some time now. So for LatentView Analytics, he has been part of the recruiting cycles and has worked for creating a culture of inclusiveness and excellence. I welcome you, sir, and thank you very much for sharing your valuable knowledge and time with us.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't quite get your name.
Hello, sir. I am Mayank Medhavi. So I'm a
Mike.
PGP one.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. And it's a pleasure to be here. So just by way of a brief introduction, I think Mike just gave a very brief intro. So I'm one of the early investors and co-founders of LatentView Analytics. I'm sure you might have heard about LatentView recently in the news. Became a public company recently. My area of specialization is in the areas of data engineering and data science. I live in Atlanta right now, visiting Chennai. I primarily focus on solutioning, helping clients define their analytics strategy, defining the data engineering roadmap, and then help them scale their AI and analytics initiatives. So with that brief introduction, I want to get started. I think the eCell team shared this topic with me a couple of days ago. So I have put together a small presentation, and I'm going to share this presentation on the screen. I think that will help us get anchored to the topic at hand. But what is the format? Do I just do the presentation first and then go for questions at the end, or how do you think we should take this up?
Mm-hmm. So we mostly go with whatever the speaker is comfortable with. So if you are okay with questions midway the speaker session, we are okay with that as well. But mostly what a lot of speakers have done is that after going about sharing their experiences and knowledge, at the end, we'll take the questions. So if you want to follow
whatever works for me, I don't have the luxury of saying this is the format when I make client presentations most of the time. So it doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's go by whatever you suggested. Right?
Right. Let's not disturb you and let you continue in full go. So we'll take the questions at the end. I request everyone to speak their questions on chat, and we'll take them one by one later.
Okay, I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, sir.
I'm sharing my PowerPoint. So the topic is how to leverage analytics in order to maximize money, right? Data is the new money, and how to leverage analytics tools in the best possible way to maximize this. So this is a brief agenda I have for today. So first, let me talk briefly about why I think data is the new money, right? It's a very vague, very high level topic. I just want to take a little bit of time and break it down, but I'm sure this is something that you probably know better than me. Second topic is more on my area of expertise, which is about how to monetize data. I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies, and if you have time, maybe the third one, right? And finally, I also want to touch a little bit on highlights on the challenges and solutions that one typically encounters as we deploy analytics to drive business value, right? So we can talk about this topic from multiple perspectives, right? So we can talk about it from the perspective of a government or an enterprise or a consumer, but I'm going to come at it purely from an enterprise angle, right? Because first of all, that's what I'm most familiar with, and secondly, I think that's what makes most relevant sense to the audience as well. I just need to excuse myself for a second because there is a little bit of disruption here. So I will just, fine, close the room and just give me 1 second, okay? Not take
sure, thanks.
All right, I'm back. So let me share my screen again.
Right, sir.
Okay, so feel free to interrupt me at any point of time if you have any questions. So as you very well know, data is the most valuable asset. In the olden days, they used to say that oil is the most valuable asset or the most valuable resource. Today, we should look at data as the most valuable resource. Of course, data is unlimited, it's renewable, it's instantly shareable, etc., etc. So it's different from oil in that sense. But there are some similarities as well. If you look at the most valuable listed companies in the world, a few years ago, they were dominated by oil firms. I should say even 10, 15 years ago, right? So ExxonMobil was one of the largest companies in the world. Today, ExxonMobil is just trading at or near its book value, right? Whereas companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, etc., have really, trading at huge premiums to their sales, and that's really because of the enormous potential afforded by technology and data, right? So these companies, the primary resource in these companies is data, with which they can monetize a lot of monetize using a variety of means, right? So, for example, Microsoft and Apple, one may dispute that they are more data-driven companies, but Microsoft has a search engine, and they also, but both of these companies intensely use data and instrumented data to improve their products and solutions, right, and services, because of which they have very strong competitive advantages, and the fact that they also have a leading technology is very helpful. We also have Amazon, Alphabet, Facebook, and I don't know what is going to come in the future. But if you look at this list, most of these are technology companies. Now, the volume of data has tremendously increased, right? So I don't even know how many zeros are there in zettabytes, uh, or or how many petabytes is zettabytes, right? So I work personally today with petabyte scale of data, right? So uh, this is also growing tremendous growth, showing tremendous growth. So you are seeing 25% year-on-year growth. However, only a very, very small amount of this data is actually usable. And even that 2% that I say that is used uh, poses enormous challenges to enterprises, right? Not to mention the remaining 98% of the data that is not even used. And out of the 2%, only a small fraction of that is actually deployed and used. Only like 10% of this data is usable directly in analytic tools, right? The remaining data has to be structured before it can be used. So what I mean by that is, for example, all your emails or images or audio and video, even if they are stored, they are not instantly usable, right? You can't go and analyze an audio file, for example, for insights. You have to extract the text from the audio file using a process, and then you have to apply natural language processing on that text before you can derive some insights, for example, right? So that's a challenge with most of this data. And among the underlying drivers of this data growth, if you look at it, IoT, or the Internet of Things, is the fastest growing area and also the biggest contributor today. And social and cloud are the things that follow closely. And enterprise data is quite large, and that's also relevant for us. Now, what should companies do with all this data, right? Is there any value in analyzing this data and deriving insights from this data? That's really what we are going to look at. Okay. Why data is valuable? There are three reasons. One is what I call as digital anti-fragility. I'm sure you would have read this book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. If you have not read it, I strongly suggest that you should read this book. It will give you a healthy dose of skepticism about the world in general. So anti-fragile means something that gets stronger when a lot of stress is applied to it, right? Up to a point. So basically, you can divide things into three categories. One is fragile, which means, fragile is something that breaks even when a small amount of stress is applied. For example, your porcelain coffee cup is fragile. Second is resilient, which means, things don't really break down under stress. Anti-fragile means things really get strong under stress, right? Now, data helps companies become anti-fragile. And the reason is because with data, companies are able to adapt to unexpected changes. For example, COVID-19 was an unexpected change. And it's a significant black swan event. Nobody foresaw that, right? And the reason why, some companies thrived, whereas others did not. Even when the companies are very similar, those companies that had actually invested significantly in data and analysis were able to take advantage of the challenging situation and also able to adapt quickly to sudden changes in consumer preferences in terms of consumption, etc. Right? So, if I give you examples, it may not be relevant for you because you may not be aware of some of these companies. But amongst retailers, there are some retailers that did really well for themselves, whereas others did not. And one of the big drivers is the fact that the former group of retailers had actually invested in digital transformation, multi-channel retailing on a solid foundation of data, right? Others did not. So those that did not really found it difficult to adapt and thrive. The second reason why data is valuable is because data allows you to look at new ways of monetizing this data, right? So that's innovation. And finally, we also look at, data also helps enterprises get a pulse of their employees, their customers, their suppliers, partners, etc. And this pulse is very, very important especially in challenging times, to build trust, empathy, etc. And loyalty is a much needed customer loyalty or employee loyalty is a much needed attribute in these times, right? And data helps customers, enterprises to cultivate loyalty. Let's go into how to monetize data, right? So here is where I'll be talking a little bit about case studies and examples. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is I want to highlight 5 different ways of monetizing data, right? I mean, it could be 10. You can break this down into even more granular categories, but I thought this is a useful way of looking at it. So first way is to leverage data to acquire more customers and acquire profitable customers, and also grow the value of your existing customer franchise, right? So that's the first way. And let's look at an example, right? So I want to talk about an example where a B2C digital company added $100 million every year by targeting its customers and sell more, retain profitable ones, etc. Right? I just wanted to highlight this. So this is what I call as customer lifecycle analytics, right? As you're all aware, this is a funnel, which is a reasonable representation of how customers find solutions for their problems, right? So first they become aware of what the problem is, and then they do undertake some research, trial, use some products to see if it works for them. And if it does, then they buy more of it, and then they buy other products and so on. So this funnel represents, from the enterprise perspective or from a company standpoint, how customers, a customer life cycle, right from the beginning of how, when they become aware of the problem until you win the customer, and then sometimes you may lose the customer and win them back as well, right? Now, if you look at the key building blocks of customer lifecycle analytics, first is about segmentation and modeling. So what this means is you look at historical customer attributes, behavior, transactions, etc., and then divide them into different customer segments, right? This can be done in a variety of ways. You can use analytic models to do that, combined with deep knowledge of existing customer segments, deep knowledge of cultural trends, and so on and so forth. So that's one building block. The second building block is what you call as consumer insights or customer insights, right? You can just analyze customer behavior and then obtain insights into what drives those behavior, right? And using this, you can target specific campaigns and so on. And finally, it's about campaign analytics, which is about running controlled experimentation to test the impact of specific strategies. And, for example, if you want to target, let's say, millennials for the holiday season using a credit card that you want to offer, right? You really want to understand what drives millennials, what are the values that they share, what are the attributes that they find appealing and interesting, right? Why would they try you out, etc., right? That can be obtained through consumer insights. Now, millennial is just one segment that I'm talking about, right? Now, obviously, you don't want to stop at obtaining customer insights, but you also want to take actions, running campaigns, for example, right? So you don't know what works, so you try out a few experiments, right? Which is what I call as controlled experiments, because you only change a few factors between various test groups and control groups, right? And then see what works, which group responds most effectively to your campaigns. So you may change the messaging, you may change the creatives, you may change the targeting channel, time, etc. You may make small changes here and there and see which of those changes actually leads to more of the expected behavior that you want to see, right? And there are a variety of things that you can do as part of campaign analytics. One is what you call as cross-sell. The second is what you call as life cycle based marketing. Cross-sell is if you already have a customer, how can you sell more goods to them, right? Life cycle based marketing is I have customers at different cohorts, right? People who have been acquired long time ago, but who have been with me for some time and they have spent a lot of money on me. That's one type of customer. Those who have just been recently acquired, that's another type of customer. So these customers are all different in terms of the stage of life cycle that they have been. So you want to tailor your marketing strategies based on not just where they are in the life cycle, but also in terms of what is the propensity to buy, how much is the potential lifetime value, etc. Right. So that's what is called life cycle marketing. These are all very, very heavily data driven, and there is a huge amount of lift that companies get by through these highly refined analytics practices. So this is one example of how you can actually make more money from data, right? This is what you call as customer analytics. Now, I would like to take a pause here to see if you have any questions before we go further.
Right. Yes, sir. So we have a couple of questions, mostly from our YouTube viewers. So the first question was about the data that you talked about earlier. Right. So the question goes, the 2% of the data can be collected, right? So this is Achintya, and he wants to know what is good form of data, which can be directly used. So how do we make sure that the data we collect is something which adds business value to you? So how do we go from that 2% to 100%?
So I think the current reality is that even the 2% that enterprises collect today, they find it very challenging to use the data for effective decision making. So data collection may be relatively an easier problem to solve than putting the data to good use, right? But even then, collection is not the same as making it usable, right? So you have to collect the data, and then you have to refine, process, cleanse the data, and then you have to make it usable, and then you have to put it in the hands of the right people, right? So there is we can't say which data is going to give you the maximum business value, right? You will have to have approach that with a combination of business knowledge and an experimental attitude.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir. So we have another question. It's based on the recent slide you showed. So for analytics for product development is what the overarching theme of this question is. So how is when you collect data from, let's say, the business point of view, like we just talked about, right? So this question revolves around that how is data collected for a new product versus an existing product which is already in place. So when you're identifying a need versus enhancing or modifying a particular product, what is the difference in the procedure of going about collecting the data?
Got it. So I'll talk about it from the perspective of digital products. Okay, so which is where I think it's easier to collect data from, right? Let's say, for example, you have launched a new software which you want to really see collect data on its usage, right? Initially, you want to really instrument the product so that you can start to collect more and more data, right? Initially, you don't have much of a data to start with, and in that phase, you can't do more of quantitative analysis, right? But what you can do is you can start to gather initial feedback from customers through surveys, and we do a lot of that actually, right? So this is what we call as qualitative analysis, right? So we do a lot of survey-based approach to collect data from customers because we don't have enough quantitative data. We don't have enough clicks. We don't have enough product usage data, etc. Right? So customers may not have actually paid for the product also. Maybe they're in a trial stage. Product has just been launched. Maybe they are in the first 60 days of trying it out, or you may not have enough customers who are actually paying for it. So in such cases, it's best to go for a qualitative approach to understanding, or getting insights on why customers use your data and so on. Use your product, right? Once you start to acquire enough customers, etc., then you can actually go for a more quantitative approach to analyzing consumer behavior. What drives customer usage? Why do customers pay? And why do customers not pay? Why do customers are tried? How can you actually make them come back?
Right. So, like in a nutshell, like what I got from that answer is that when you go for, let's say, a new product per se, you need to be a little more explorative in nature, and like, I'm really sorry about that. So, tools like survey mechanisms and other resources which help you get to know the customer better, that works
Got it.
more. Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So before you move on, there is a last question. So quite a long question. I'll also repeat this, but let me just put it out on chat first, so you can also view it later on. Right. So the question is the profitability of cross-selling campaigns and the role of data in the same. So often we see cross-selling in brand deals and food combos where companies guarantee more than one of their products or service for a lesser price. How can data help in making a choice that undermines profitability? Yeah.
So I read this question as how can data help in making a choice that determines the profitability, right?
Exactly.
So essentially the question is about cross-selling. And see, I'm not really familiar with brand deals and food combos, etc., because I'm not from this geography, right? I don't live here. But essentially what you're asking is how do you know ahead of time which combinations or which kind of cross-sells can drive profitability, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, it comes from a combination of two things. One is business knowledge, right? So people who have been running campaigns in the past, obviously, you don't start to run campaigns one fine day. Maybe you do, but there are other people who have been running campaigns. And you should listen to business knowledge. You should listen to people who have been running campaigns. And they have accumulated a wealth of knowledge on what works and what does not, right? That's also data in one sense. It's not structured, codified data, but it's definitely the insights that they have is also very valuable. And second thing is when you don't have even that to fall back on, you can actually go and start to run experiments based on some intuition that you have. You start with a hypothesis, right? Saying, this combination can work, right? And then you take a small group of people and experiment so that you can test your hypothesis. And then, once you conduct that experiment, you can actually collect data and you can see for yourself if the hypothesis is right or not, right? Most of the times, I think the experiments don't show you anything, right? Most of the time, it shows you there is no difference between this group versus that group. But sometimes when it shows you a significant lift, and that could be your next big insight, right? Now, once you get that insight, that becomes institutional knowledge within your team, and the cycle repeats itself.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir. These were the questions we have right now.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's, this is one way of monetizing data that we talked about, which is about customer analytics, right? So the next way of looking at it is by making your products and services better. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this for lack of time, but essentially what this means is, using data, you can significantly improve your product or service, right? Now, we worked with a large search engine, and one of the things that we did was we collected data on using a consumer panel, okay? And this data had not just information regarding the usage of our client's product, but also regarding usage of the client's closest competitors. Right? There are only 3 or 4 major competitors in this segment. So we were able to first collect this data, right? This is just raw search engine pages, right? So think Google, think Bing, think DuckDuckGo, anything else that you want to think about. So these are the popular search engines. There are maybe others also. Now, from this consumer panel, we really looked at what are the things that the members of the panel search, and which search engines do they use for what search, right? And we also instrumented the search pages so that we are able to precisely predict or precisely understand where they click within the search page. Do they click the first link, the second link, third link, etc.? If you search for something and you always click the third link, that means the first and the second link are not as relevant to you as it needs to be, right? So, this is also an indicator of how relevant that particular results are. And also, if you look at a search result, there are so many features within the page. There are star ratings, there are sliders, there are many other, very innovative features on the search results page that calls out for action, right? There is advertisements on the top, on the right, etc. Right? So do users click on ads, or do they click on the organic search results? How big is the search results page? What percentage of the page is actually ads? What percentage is white space? So we were able to do all of this instrumentation. And then based on this, we were able to make a tremendous amount of suggestions to the product team. And, this actually resulted in, hundreds of millions of dollars of additional monetization. Now, a third example is about saving costs through improved efficiencies. Okay. Now, again, there are a lot of examples we can give. One example I wanted to talk about is an appliance repair company dramatically reduced the cycle time. So when I say cycle time, let me define what it is. Okay. So let's say you have an appliance like a washing machine, and unfortunately, it one day breaks down. So you call this appliance repair company and ask that they send a technician to come to your home and fix it, right? Now, the cycle time is the time between when you raise this request to that company until the time when the actual fix is done. So let's say, you call up on Friday and tell the company, and the company sends a technician, let's say on Tuesday, and the technician comes and takes a look at it, but somehow he feels that you need additional parts to repair this washing machine. Okay, so he orders parts which come by, say, Friday, and then he comes back on Saturday to fix it. So that means that cycle time is about 8 to 9 days, right? Now, that may or may not be good, but what we found is this particular company was taking a huge amount of time in order to fix repairs, and therefore they were losing market share to competitors who are much more nimbler than them. So what we did was we went and first studied the cycle time distribution, and we found that only 50% of the requests were being completed in 50 days. Now, the management of this company wanted to complete 95% of the repairs in under 5 days, right? From 50% under 5 days to 95% under 5 days. That is a significant improvement. Now, it's not just about, it's about many things, right? So this was an intensely data-driven project. I'll just briefly take you through what are all the components to it, right? So essentially, if you look at it, there were 4 things that we needed to fix. One is we need to first, forecast demand properly, because we need to have the right amount of technicians, etc. Second is about workforce planning. How many technicians do you want to have on your roles versus how many do you want to have as temporary staffing contractors? Third is about inventory, right? So based on all the things that companies are selling, how much of parts do you need to have in each of your technicians' trucks, right? So for example, if you're a LG washing machine company, right? You know what kind of washing machines have been sold. So you need to know which part breaks down most often, and you need to have those parts ready with you, right? You can't say every time a customer breaks, you'll order it from a warehouse, which is far away, right? And finally, it's about supply allocation. So these are the four challenges that we looked at. Okay, and then from 75 requests, so from 40%, we went to 75%. And one of the things is we looked at improving forecasting. That's one example. So forecast accuracy went down from 75% to 93%, which means, so when I say forecasting for the demand for specific services, right? So forecasting for washer breakdowns in this geography during this time period. So that's what I mean by forecasting. Now, the next thing that we did was supply planning and optimization. So we know we need to have the right number of technicians, for which we need to predict which of these technicians are going to attract how many, what is the service request demand, etc. Right. Third is about inventory, having the right parts in the right truck at the right time, and also about dynamic capacity reallocation. Right. Now, this helped tremendously in reducing the cycle time from 40% or 50% to 75% in 5 days. Right. So that's one example of making money from data. A fourth approach is to reduce fraud and risk. Right. Now, you are very familiar with this, but credit card companies reduce fraud. And it's not just one company that does the. So if you have an ICICI Visa card, right? So Visa, the network, actually reduces fraud by constantly scanning for anomalies in the product usage. And ICICI, the bank that issues the card, that's also, has a fraud model that constantly works in the background, right? And the credit bureaus also have a fraud model that constantly works in the background. So all three of them work together, right? So fraud is very heavily data driven, and there is it's a very dynamic field also, because fraudsters are always inventing new areas, new ways of fraud, and companies need to stay at least one step behind fraudsters. You can't stay ahead of them all the time, but at least one step behind, so that you can quickly catch new patterns that emerge. And finally, the other ways of making data, I've just clubbed them into others because they are too numerous to list. Companies like Walmart and all the big retailers, they have intimate data on customers and their purchase patterns, etc. So they sell that data to their vendors, which is the consumer product good companies like Procter and Gamble, because companies like P&G don't always have access to direct sales data, right? So they purchase this data from their retail partners. So that's one business model, but there is also a lot more, real-time matching kind of thing, right? So you have location data based on which the business models of Uber and Lyft are. Amazon also has this third-party sellers data, right? So they just have information about what the customer wants and what the seller provides. They are just a matchmaker. So these are the broad ways of making data, making money from data, right? So I also want to talk a little bit about challenges and solutions, then open for questions. Okay. Now, there's a framework to think about the types of data analytics, right? So one is, on the level of foresight, insight, or hindsight, right? Now, descriptive analytics is just simple reporting, dashboards, etc. Just understanding what happened in the past. Second is more diagnostic, which is about why something happened, just exploring historical data to really understand, get deeper into why something happened. A third is about predictive analytics, which is about predicting what is likely to happen. And fourth is prescriptive analytics, which is about marrying the predictions with your business goals to arrive at most optimal solutions. Okay, and typically, if you look at a data and analytics ecosystem, right? So there are 4 or 5 layers in it. So just look at the bottom part, right? So there is the source layer, and then there is this data ingestion layer, which is about actually getting all of the data into the ecosystem. And then there is this storage and processing layer, which is where I think this data is cleansed, data is integrated. So you may have customer data from transactions, right? The customers may have purchased some things. You also have data from clickstream, data from social media, data from advertising campaigns, data from the devices that customers may use to, or the apps that they may use, all of that, right? So all of this data needs to be brought together and processed. Now, once this data is processed, it needs to be made available through the delivery layer or through the metrics layer. So metrics are essentially KPIs that are important for the company. Like, for example, what is the total usage of the product? Is this trending below, downward or upward? Those kind of things. Okay. And then you have the delivery layer, which is where all the analytics is done. So before analytics is done, there is a huge amount of work that you need to actually do to bring all the data into one place. Okay, I just want, if there is one takeaway from that slide, I just want you to understand that analytics is only 20%, data work is about 80%, right? So that's a big challenge that companies face when they embark on an analytics initiative. So if you look at the whole process, first, you start with what problems you want to solve through analytics. You can't say, I have data now, let's do something, right? You have to really be more precise about what is the problem that you want to solve, right? Most of the times, when we talk to rookie clients who are very immature in analytics, and they'll say, hey, I have all the data, now you do your analytics. Now we have to go back and ask them, do you have a strategy for competing on this data, right? Now, many times they don't have it. Okay, strategy means essentially, how do you want to use the data for solving business problems? The second is about, if you don't already have the data, you need to create that foundation. And then you do the analytics. And it's not enough if you just do the analytics, you have to embed that into decision making. And you have to ensure that your frontline workers or the decision makers actually use your analytics solutions, right? So this is what we call as the data analytics process. So there are 5 steps in it. And, this is a very generic approach. There's nothing proprietary about it. In this process, there could be challenges that happen, right? So this is the process that we saw. The first challenge really is people don't have analytics vision. And the way we want to solve that is, first, executives need to set up a series of workshops to educate and get educated on the potential of leveraging data in their business, right? And then you define a feasibility matrix on 2 dimensions, right? So first, you understand what is the ease of doing something, and second is what is the impact. You always prefer to do things that are easy to do, but which have a high impact, right? And you avoid things which are very difficult to do and which have very little impact, potential impact. The second is, when companies start on this data foundation, they take years and years to get this data in shape. Now, we do sometimes work with companies where they say, we have a 2-year roadmap for moving this data to the cloud, or 2-year roadmap for building a cloud data lake, right? 2-year roadmap is fine, but you have to give your business users access to data much faster than that. Weeks, if not months, right? So anything more than a few weeks, the users will lose interest because they have to run their business, right? So always focus on iterative incremental approach and get access to clean data as soon as possible. Don't boil the ocean. The third one is about analytics, right? Doing analytics well requires a combination of 3 skills: business, data, and math, right? To put it simply. And it's easy to get data skills and math skills, but a combination of this is actually what really is missing most of the time. And that's where I think we need to combine forces with companies in order to get access to combination of skills, right? And you don't have to reinvent any new, do fundamental research or anything, right? When you do applied analytics, most of the time it's all about getting something that's good enough rather than solving fundamental research problems. The fourth challenge that we see is that data scientists build very fancy analytics, but it's not used by the business, right? Because it's not used because models are great, but what is the impact on the ground? That's something that people have not thought about. They postpone this to the end of the project, but process analysis or process modeling needs to start before you build analytical models, right? You need to know, okay, if I actually predict customers that are likely to attract, what am I going to do with that knowledge, right? Unless you have a good answer for that, you should not even go and build the model. The last one is about enabling end user adoption, right? So many times, you build fancy analytical models, you build great workflows and solutions, but still it does not make a big impact on the business. And the reason is because the end users who are supposed to actually run this new enhanced process with analytics don't even know how to do it, right? So you need to proactively involve users in designing and redesigning the process. And you also need to train the users on how to do it. Now, these are some of the challenges. There are a lot more. There are red flags that happen when companies are not doing this right. But for now, I think this is a good start. With this, I would like to stop and start to take questions.
Right. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation, sir. We have a couple of questions. Even right now, I have a question which I was thinking about, right? So, throughout the presentation, I realized that what we want to analyze, need to have a strategy in place first, and we need to have a vague hypothesis about what is the end goal and end result that we want. But how do we identify what to monitor and what to leave out in the initial hypothesis when we're converting, let's say, an offline business to a digital business? We want to involve analytics. How do you realize what to monitor and what to leave out?
So that depends on the problem that you want to solve. Let's say you want to move from a offline business, offline retailer to emphasizing more on the digital retail front. Okay. Now, digital retail, merchandising is a very important factor, right? What products you make available on the web, and that's very important, right? Because customers can search products, they can compare prices, they can do all sorts of things, right? So merchandising is going to undergo a huge change when you emphasize more on digital, right? Second is delivery is very, very important, right? For customers, right? They want to have the flexibility to get the product as soon as possible. So if you are offline and if you're going to go digital, offline means you take delivery right away and you are actually able to feel the product and so on, right? Digital means delivery is going to be delayed, but customers want to have the flexibility of when they want to take delivery of the product, how fast, etc. Right? So that may be another important reason. These are just my hypothesis of what's important, right? So you will have to go with some hypothesis on, so for example, your merchandisers or the merchants who actually buy stuff from the vendors and display it on your shelves, they know what kind of products may sell when online more than in the offline shelves, right? Offline, you're limited by shelf space, but online you are not, right? So, but at the same time, you can't make everything available because you may not have them in your inventory, and delivering them may take too long, right? So that's a kind of balance. That's, as I said in the past, also some time back, that it comes from a combination of business knowledge. But when you don't have enough business knowledge, you start by some hypothesis and do some experiments to figure out what it needs to be.
Yes, sir. So that answers my question. Another recurring question which has been coming up is about privacy and like data collection. So how do you like a lot of firms a lot of social media firms and a lot of other firms who've been taking our data, not only from the point of view of us giving consent, but also other forms of data which can be interpreted in a good way. So how do we tackle the problem of privacy and analytics?
So, in the US, for example, and in Europe, there are very strong laws, right, that mandate that enterprises will have to comply with these laws, right? And these laws could be things like, customers may opt out of analytical processing. Customers may opt to correct or update their information. Customers may opt to see what is available, right? Or customers may ask you to delete their information. Opt out, delete, see, update. So many things are possible, right? So typical enterprise, it's very hard to pin down one single location where the customer data is available, right? It's in so many systems and in so many places, right? So, and also, the privacy laws are very strict about how you can use this data, right? And for example, you can't do what in insurance is called redlining, which means poor people cannot be asked to pay higher insurance simply because in the past, more accidents happened in that zone, right? So in the places where they live. So the 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 way to address privacy challenges is to create a strong foundation or a framework of what companies should be able to do and not should not be able to do, right? Another challenge with privacy uh, is about what goes on into the models. Nobody knows what goes on it sometimes, right? Models are black boxes. So we need more transparency in how predictive models work, especially the deep learning models, right? Do they use sensitive data as part of their models or not, right? Because that may lead to discrimination and that may lead to racial profiling and so on and so forth, right? So transparency in how models are being built is also something that is needed. So when doing data driven decisions, you don't want to intentionally or accidentally do something that discriminates against a group of people, right? So you need to take a lot of care, and analysts need to be more sensitized to these challenges as well, right?
Right. So thank you so much, sir, for the questions. These are all the questions that we had right now. Um, but before we end the session, would you mind if I just quickly play a video from our sponsor, title sponsor?
Sure.
Right. That's it, sir.
All right.
So thank you so much, Mr. Ramesh, for joining us. And we had a delightful conversation with you. And I hope everyone has taken up enough information like I have. And it was great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us. We'll be ending the session now.